Boy, do we have a lot of slides to get through before you guys can be permitted. Doors are being locked. You cannot leave until we get through all these slides. No. So actually we're going to still try to cover a fair amount of ground. So just to give you an idea of our agenda, what Carol and I talked about was between now and break, we're going to cover most, if not all, of the child part of the program, as well as a couple of connected issues like group process that we wanted to talk about. And then after break, if there's any of that to finish up, we will. And then we will talk about the parent program. But obviously, we're going to provide you more of a sketch of that rather than going into complete detail in all of those sessions. So if you want to know more about the parent program, you're going to have to come to Tuscaloosa, or we'll come back. Anyway, so we were talking about the problem-solving unit, and in addition to presenting the kids with these levels, with problem identification, choices, and consequences as issues that are part of the problem-solving model, there also are a set of activities that we go through with the kids that come up about the same time that we're covering each of those points. So, for example, in the session where we're talking about solution generation, there are a couple of activities that are really just about that. So they're not about kids' problems per se, it's really just to model this process. And so there, in the text in the manual, there will be this description of a problem picture, that then there can be some problem solving about. And so the picture would look like that. And the kids are asked to take the point of view of Ben, who's kind of the bystander in this bully victim sort of story, and think about what Ben could do. And our task as the therapist at that point is to help kids to come up with as many different choices as they can for what Ben could do. And again, as we talked about earlier, this would be at the point at which we're encouraging brainstorming, we're modeling it. In the text, there are possible solutions, so if the kids really get stuck, there are things that you can kind of think to add in. But the purpose of this is not to get these, it's really to get what the kids say. So that's the purpose of it. This is that worksheet that we talked about. And this is something you would go back to fairly frequently as you're working through role plays, as you're working through children's actual problems. So you'll have frequent use of this. I'm going to skip this particular thing in the interest of time. I'll skip that modeling tape. I'll show you another video in just a minute, but not that one. So there's a set of other activities that were involved that come up in sessions. So there's a Trouble at Sea game, and I'm going to describe that briefly. There's a blockers and solvers game. I'll also talk a little bit about that. And then there are, of course, other activities that are in the sessions. So the Trouble at Sea activity, so you talk to the group and say, you people in my group, you're members of a fishing party in a boat that has run into bad weather and has engine trouble. Because of rough weather, the captain says the boat needs to be lighter. You crew members, you guys in my group, must decide which items to throw overboard. You need to decide as a group which items to throw overboard first. And so these are the 10 items that they can throw over. And when we do this in a group, to help make it more concrete, we often have little pictures of each of these things. So they really have the sense of which are the things that could be tossed overboard. And then there's a group discussion about which things would be tossed over. And then the discussion is really about why. So what's the consequence of either throwing something over or of retaining it? What happens to you? What's the consequence of that? And so we're encouraging consequential thinking. This is the kind of task that actually works quite well if you break your group into 2 subgroups. So if you have 6 kids, you broke it into subgroups of 3. And then you have the 2 groups try to do this kind of choice. and then they talk about their consequences, and then they discuss how their choices and consequences are similar or not. Why one group chose one thing, why another chose something else. So these are some of the kind of questions that you use as process for that. So it's kind of a, again, it's meant to be an engaging activity that's really not about the interpersonal problem, but which allows you, in this case, to talk about what happens next, or what's the consequence, affects the decision you make. There's an activity that's directly related to a task we did yesterday, which was the 20-second task, where you wait 20 seconds and then you think of different solutions. And so we actually have kids do that, and then are able to then talk about how there's different kinds of solutions that emerge once you have a chance to be deliberative and to think through things. And then this is a task, comes up in session 19. So here, by this point now, we've covered really the basics of PIC, and we're hitting, in some ways, finer points or more complex issues. And the major goal here was this one of persistence, and we've talked about this already, where what you really want, ideally, is for kids to get to the point where they feel that they always have a backup, that there's something else they can do, that things aren't going to work right the first time they try something, but that there's something else they can do. So they can be blocked, but then they can proceed forward. So we would divide our group into solvers and blockers. And so the solvers have a chance, we present a problem, the solvers have a chance to come up with the solution to the problem, and then the half of the group that are the blockers have 2 minutes to think about how they're going to block that solution. And then it goes back to the solvers, and then they think about what else could they do. And then it goes back to the blockers, and then the blockers block it. And it keeps going. It could go on forever. Actually, you eventually have to stop it. So this would be an example. You're in a group at school. Your group has the chance to earn a party if they earn enough points. However, to earn enough points for the party, each member of the group needs to return their goal sheet every week with at least one signature. Your group may not be getting the party because several members of the group keep forgetting their goal sheets or having difficulty meeting their goals. What can you do? So in this example, the solver team could come up with a set of solutions like threaten the students. You better bring in your goal sheet or we're going to beat you up. Right? Threaten the students. Use a buddy system to remind kids. Bribe the teachers to sign the sheet. Or help members to pick better goals. And in this example, the team chooses solution 2, to use buddies. Right? So not a bad solution. That sounds like a good idea. It goes over to the blockers. The blockers have these 2 minutes. And the blockers come up with the obstacle of the buddy becoming sick all week. And so the buddy's not there to remind the member to bring the goal sheet to group. So then it goes back to the solvers, and they have to think of either one of these other solutions or another type of solution, and then it goes back to the blockers again. So, even though we're blowing through things here very fast, we're going to do a little blockers and solvers here, just real quick. We're not quite set up to do this real well, but if you guys essentially, we do about halfway through. So you guys are going to be team A. You're going to be the solvers, okay? All of you. And you guys are the bad guys. You guys are the blockers over here, right? Solvers and blockers. So here's the problem. You've been saving for a long time and finally have $20 in your bank account. You have just been invited to a birthday party for your best friend. You also want to buy something for yourself that costs $15. Sounds like a math problem that I took when I was a kid, but the train was going this fast. If you buy what you want for yourself, you will not have enough money to buy your friend a nice gift. What can you do? So, can you guys, across your tables, take like 2 minutes here and think of a solution? Well, you can consider several solutions, but you have to come up with one at the end of several minutes.
Buy them stuff for $5 and make something craft store.
Car wash. That's a good idea.
Okay.
So do some chores. Yeah.
Okay.
Extra chores for extra money. Yeah.
Say what it is?
We'll do chores for extra money.
Do chores for extra money. Okay. You guys, I originally thought of as being part of the solvers group. Does that sound fine for you guys?
Oh, sorry. Didn't
So-
know you were.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah, I didn't know.
Sure.
So doing chores for extra money, right? And you guys didn't hear that. But guess what? Their solution is they're going to do chores for extra money. And so now you've got 2 minutes to think of a way to block that as a group.
We don't have any cards tomorrow. We have schoolwork.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Time to earn extra money. That's true.
So have you all come up with a block already?
Yeah.
Oh, you are very efficient blockers. You know, you're just really good at that. Okay, so what's the block?
No time to earn more money.
There's no time to earn more money. So,
Party tomorrow.
oh, parties tomorrow. Oh, okay, parties
I
tomorrow.
have time to do my chore today.
Okay, now it goes back to you guys, so now you get to come up with another solution. So,
That's right. You can do the dishes today. You can wash your car. So we can do.
Okay.
Sure.
okay, so you invite somebody else in to buy the present. Okay? Blockers. They've invited somebody else in to contribute the money so they have enough money to buy the present. They have enough
Can't agree on how much you want to buy.
They can't agree on the present.
There you go. The what? They can't agree on the present.
Okay? So they can't agree on the present. Uh-oh, coming back to you.
They give her the money. We go to the dollar store.
Give her a gift certificate with the money.
Yes, Mom. Yes. Go together, give a gift certificate, right?
And then the person could choose their own gift. Exactly. Go together.
Now, you don't have to talk to the blockers, so to the other table.
They're on our side.
Yeah, the gift certificate
card to
could be
Walmart,
one,
something like that.
maybe not just to a particular store, but one that's, you know, those
that
kind of
allows-
things that are
yeah.
good at
Yeah,
Walmart.
gift certificate.
Everybody likes it.
Okay, do you have one? So what is it? State it.
We're giving cash in an envelope. Yeah.
So the friend, what they're saying is the friend doesn't want to go in because they don't like our gifts.
Can't
So
agree.
Right.
we'll say, how about we combine cash? What you
Right.
want.
So you put cash in the envelope, and then that's going to be the gift to the blockers.
Yeah.
Not equal contributors.
Did the blockers give up? No. No.
Their solution was.
I say it's not his party, so he cannot just invite you or anybody else.
Okay, so what we'll do in the interest of time here is go ahead and just stop at this moment, okay? But kind of gives you a feel for what you're trying to do, right? You're trying to get this active interchange going. And the kids like this a lot. Kind of like it's kind of fun for us, fun for kids to do as well. The one thing that I do recommend is that when you do have to end it, try to end it not when it's been successfully blocked. Because the point of the activity, right, the moral of the story is if you keep being persistent, you'll come up with a solution. So actually where you'd want to stop is after you guys came up with the solution. Said, well, you guys, we need to move on. You guys did all a great job. Well, you guys had a solution, and then transition on. But the point is, you just keep going, right? You're persistent. You guys are great at being persistent and sticking on. Okay. So another big activity in this program is we dedicate actually 3 sessions out of our precious sessions for creating a videotape. So videotape or audio tape. So one of the issues, of course, for all of you is whether or not you'd have access to video recording or audio recording equipment in the places where you're going to conduct this work. I think there's some real advantages for video recording, and kids love it. And it's very powerful. They get very enthusiastic about it. They really get to see themselves. So if it's kind of a little hard to get the equipment, I encourage people to try to get it anyway, if it's at all possible. But as a backup, using an audio recording of the activity certainly is sufficient, and it's a record. Kids also can feel proud of that, and they like to hear themselves on it. is there anybody that could imagine they couldn't either video record or audio record? So there's not any equipment. So the
I can't get a release of consent from all parents.
you can't get a release of consent, right? That's a real issue. Yep. Yep, that's a real issue. So what you would do would be to go through this very systematic, planned role play, more in the form of a skit, and that's how you explain it. You know, it's going to be like a skit. So we're going to come up with a plan for what's going to happen. There's going to be description of the actors who are in it and what they're all going to do. So I present it like a skit, and they can do that. And then also the other thing that can be done if you don't have either video or audio recording is either as part of that skit or separate from it, you can have kids create a kind of a cartoon book which describes a problem situation and an outcome and then different solutions. So there's several backup things you can do if you really are stuck. But again, I'm going to, if it's at all possible to do the video, I think it's really helpful. You know, these are kids who, we get to this point, it's about 2/3 way through the group. They've been going through lots of sessions. You know, some of them can be bored, but they look forward to this fact that there's going to be something like a video recording or audio recording that they're going to do. It's also an opportunity then, of course, once you have the video or audio, to play it back. So that's with the skit, even though kids can get excited about it, you don't have the record of it that you can play back to them. So this is, and playing it back, then they can they can identify things that were good ideas, things they could change if they wished. So when we do this with the kids, we have to create a script, and we do that in these couple of sessions where we're getting ready to do the videotaping. And even though the script doesn't have to be word for word, it could be more thematic to really make this flow well. And I would think even for a skit you want to do this, is to have at least a rough skit script so that there's a logic to where things are going. The kids in the group all brainstorm and they contribute to this. Roles are assigned. And you, as the therapist, may be the one to be the primary role prescriber. At this point, you know your kids, and you know who's going to be able to handle roles pretty well, and who's going to take this seriously versus somebody who's not. So, at least for the main role play, I'd videotape. I'd want it to go fairly well, so I'd work it out that way. But you'll have opportunities to have kids switch around and to take other roles, and you can do some secondary videotaping as well, or audio taping. And then before you have the product, you want to have them rehearse. And this is in part just to get the product so it's clear, the video recording or audio recording, but it's partly just, again, as we've talked about earlier, it's an opportunity for practice and practice and practice. So we're going back over a set of skills that, solutions that we think would be useful. So we script at least 3 different alternative solutions and the consequences of each. Over time, we've gone more and more to talking about having those 3 alternative solutions ideally be variations of competent solutions. Although I'm going to show you an example or two where that's not true, but where you have some other range. But in general, I would go with competent solutions that are being enacted. And then as part of this, the child will have a little time at the beginning of the video recording or audio recording or skit where they will get to explain what the PIC model is. So they're going to be an expert. They're going to be presenting that to the viewer, presumed viewer out there. So it's their opportunity to, in a sense, have a little kind of a mini advertisement for what it is that they've been working on. I don't know if any of you have seen some of Phil Kendall's work, but he tends to include something like that in some of his work as well. So this is an example.
Hey kids, today we're going to learn about the PIC models, and the PIC model helps us to solve problems. The P stands for problem, The I stands for identification. The C stands for choices, and the last C stands for consequence. And today we're going to have a problem with a boy that he has at school. A problem that the boy has at school.
But what he's saying is that the PI, and it stands for problem identification, choices, consequences, and you kind of see when he's doing it, I don't know which one it is, choices or consequences, he kind of forgets what it is, and then, oh yeah, that's what it is, yeah. So it's one of those moments where he's, so it's not quite polished, but it's kind of what kids do, you know, it's what they're kind of doing at that moment.
What can I do to pick with him? Ha ha!
You broke my pencil. I'm going to tell. Okay. That's for breaking my pencil.
You better not push me. Bring it. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. You two are fighting again. You're going to get in trouble and have to go to the office.
Girl, because she broke his pencil. But the consequence of that was that they both had to go to the office and they got in trouble. Let's try it again. You broke my pencil.
Ooh, I'm going to go tell. I saw you throwing pencils. You are going to have to go to the office.
The boy chose to throw the pencil at her because she broke his pencil. And then the consequence of that was that his teacher told him to go to the office and he got in trouble again. Let's try that again. She broke my pencil. I'm going to go tell Miss Mary.
Miss Mary, she broke my pencil
To
again.
tell the teacher because the girl broke his pencil. And for him telling the teacher, that was a good thing. But so he didn't get in trouble, but the girl did. The pig money is a good thing to use. Bye-bye.
The amount of work that it takes to get that little piece is a lot. So, you know, it takes a while. And this particular thing, this part of the work we're doing is individual format work as well. So this was an individual therapist, actually one of the graduate students that I have, and then one of our kids. So it was one-to-one, but yeah, you can also obviously do this with a group as well. So this is coming out of individual therapy. Any questions about it? About how to do it? Would you like to see one more? Other choice? No? Okay. So we'll do, we actually have a whole bunch, but we'll just do one more, just so you see one other.
Hi, I'm here today to teach you about the PIC model. P stands for problem, I stands for identification, first C stands for choice, and second C stands for consequence. I had a problem with my homework last week. I wanted to watch TV, but I couldn't. Let's see how we can solve this problem with the PIC model. Man, this is so boring. My favorite TV show comes on in 3 minutes. What do I do? I ain't got to do it. The problem was, I wanted to go watch my favorite TV show because it was coming on. My choice was to not do my homework and watch TV instead. My consequence for that is getting a bad grade on my math. Now I'm going to show you how to do it a different way. I'm going to do it right quick so I can go watch my TV show. Now, I zipped through my homework really fast and tried to go watch TV, but the consequence is I probably might get most of them wrong. Let's see if we can try it one more time and see if it's right. Man, my favorite TV show is about to come on in 3 minutes. I wonder what I'll do. Should I go out and watch TV anyway, or should I stay here and do my homework? I would stay here and do my homework first. That might be a good choice to do. I already have a D in math. That was the best choice to do. I wanted to watch TV, but I knew I had a bad grade in math, and I knew my mom was going to get me. So I just decided to do my homework, and I could watch TV later. Bye. Hope you can watch my next video. I hope you can see how the PIC model can work for you.
So actually our experience is that these kids really do like it. You know, they like, being on video, and it's a very, very nice opportunity to see them actually in good behavior. They're not always that well behaved. Okay, anything else? Let me just, yeah. So to help some of the tips for videotaping, you want to make sure you do the script beforehand. You want to do the rehearsal beforehand. Especially if you're doing a group, you can use cue cards. And actually that can be a role for one of the group members who's perhaps more anxious and is less likely, doesn't want to be on the video. So it can be an extra job. There can also be a job of somebody who's helping with the camera. So that's behind they're anxious. After taping a sequence, review it and discuss it. And then you decide if you're going to refilm it. Was it clear enough? You have the kids participate in all that. And remind the children that rules will still be in effect. Place limits on silly behavior. And importantly, edit silly behavior out before replays. So these kids are masters, at trying to make various signals with their fingers or whatever at the camera. So you have to be vigilant to what's actually on the video before you replay it back. Okay. And as we mentioned before, another alternative is a picture book. So this is just a simple example of where you'd start off with the problem stem. I'm mad, they won't even let me play. And then at the end, we're friends. Sorry, man. And then their job is to fill in various choices, various options that the character out here could use to become part of this group, this pair of other kids, what they could do. One of the advantages, incidentally, of this as an activity is that then you can go to your copy machine, you make a copy, the kids get to keep it. With the video or audio, they can't really. So this is more like a record that they get to carry on with them. Okay, there's a set of other sessions as part of this problem-solving module where we have, in one session, 25, we specifically deal with problems you can have with your teachers, and it kind of loops back to some of that perspective-taking work we've done before, and then we bring up how to use the PIC model around that. There are 2 sessions, specific sessions for problems with peers, although the peer problems come up at other times too, and these particular peer sessions are ones related to how do you join peer activities that you would like to be part of, and another is how to handle conflicts, peer conflicts, and how do you negotiate. And then there's a session on siblings and sibling problems that can come up. I'm going to, let's take a maybe just no more than 10 minutes, and probably less than that. If you could break up in your table into 2 or 1, 2 or 3, I guess. I guess you don't have to do it. And one of you be a child. Okay. One of you be the therapist. I would encourage you, to think about this. So from the child end, kind of approach this, especially given the task that we're doing here right now. Think about it in terms of what we talked about earlier. So go after something that's kind of low on the anger thermometer, right? So not an impossible situation, but certainly one that requires working through. Okay, so is there anybody who had concerns about that first step, though, about identifying the problem or identifying, kind of transforming that into a goal that you could work with? Did you find you had a difficult client?
someone in the class was making noise and it was bothering me.
And then your goal?
I'm like, well, sorry, I want to learn, not have distractions.
Okay. That actually was a nice jump, yeah.
To have people share with me and play with me more. We communicate more, play more.
And your problem had been?
Tend to get into arguments with peers and then get isolated because
Yeah. Right, so these are good examples, I think, where you start off with the kind of really negative situation and then you kind of come up with a goal that could be worked on. So those are good examples. The generation of choices, I assume, was okay. If somebody had problems with that, let me know that. What about consequence? Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just wondering about these kinds of kids. They tend to come up with the more negative stuff first, but also with the more positive things, they kind of say, "Yeah, but I tried that once and it didn't work, so I'm not willing to try again." I don't think that. So, do you often get that kind of? I mean, do you often have to deal with that kind of?
Right. No, you do, and I think for the purposes of the task, you go ahead and you just write it down anyway. And say, I understand what you're saying, let's just put it down there for right now. Because you're still going to go through all the consequences for all that, and one of them might be that it doesn't work. That'd be a consequence, yeah.
Well, she just said something that I've heard a lot of kids say, because we'll talk about, well, you need to let your teacher know about this. And then half the time they might say, I do let her know, and she doesn't do anything about it.
Right.
And then sometimes they're actually not incorrect about it.
Yeah. Right, yeah, I know. You can see the teacher's eye. So one of the things about if you are involved with the school, though, is that, if you know a child is wanting or is probably going to use a help-seeking solution, going to get the teacher's help around an issue, that would be a time to prime the teacher, that we've been really working on problem solving. This child has been making some effort to try to think of things to do. It's been pretty hard. And one thing that the child has talked about is coming to ask your help this coming week. So at least the teacher's primed. Doesn't mean that you can guarantee that the teacher's going to respond. That the teacher then hopefully is clear, this is not just the child badgering me or something, it's really part of the work.
I just want to ask a question about that, because for a lot of these kids, their relationships with their primary teacher are really impaired. Right. So they don't like each other at all. The teacher doesn't like the kid doesn't like the teacher. But there usually is somebody else in the school that they have a fairly good relationship with. So is it okay to seek the help of this other teacher who can then act as a kind of a liaison with your own classroom teacher around these issues?
I think that's an excellent point. I think, right, so when you're thinking about help seeking from a teacher, it's not all teachers aren't the same, and trying to find the most supportive, benign one would make sense. That's a good point. Yeah.
I think to some degree that's great, but we also have to be careful not to take the power away from the teacher who the student resides in. Because I've had situations where I've seen kids say, well, I like this person better, so I'm going to stand up and leave the classroom. Yeah. And so there's issues where we have to say, okay, you are allowed to go and see this person, but you need a pass, and the pass has to come from your teacher.
Right, so there still needs to be a procedure, it needs to be built in. Yep. Mm-hmm. So that'd be part of the solution in a way. It'd have to include those steps. Okay, in terms of consequences, any issues about that, any problems with trying to do that part of the model? Trying to generate these consequences for solutions. You're able to get good and bad, yeah.
I think because of the label consequences, we tended to gravitate towards the negative side of it, instead of thinking really about the positive consequences. But I think that could also maybe have been like an adult thing, because that's how we think about that word sometimes.
But I think kids tend to do that too. So when we introduce in the group the idea of consequences, we talk about that's what happens next. And if you're aware that the kids are, once you start talking about consequences, they're only talking about the negatives, then you just, I think, go back and talk more and more frequently about what happens next, rather than, even though the C is for consequences, you just bring that back. Anything else on consequences? Okay. So we're going to move on to the next unit.
Okay, so we're going to finish up with the last major unit of the child program. Has to do with the issue that Dr. Lochman was raising yesterday, that many of these children, because they have social skill deficits, that they've had problematic relationships with peers in the past and can either be at risk for or have already kind of taken up with groups of kids who also show problem behavior. So this is something of concern that we try to address in a number of sessions toward the end of the program. So there are several sessions and activities with topics on the impact that our friends have on us, and that who we hang out with actually impacts our own behavior and schoolwork, things like that, and that we want to be thoughtful about who we're spending our time with, and choosing our friends wisely, and also being the type of person that people want to be friends with as well. So we have a number of sessions here. And one of the first topics is on peer pressure, especially if you're working with students close to the middle school transition or in middle school or older. This is an important topic to address with them. If you're working with middle, elementary, or younger students, often the concept of peer pressure is fairly new to them when you call it in those terms, but if you describe it as the time that someone tried to get you to do something that you didn't think was the right thing to do, or that might have a bad consequence for you, that can be helpful to them. So we'll start this session with a discussion of kind of defining peer pressure, what it is, and what it means to the kids in the group. It can be helpful to elicit some examples of types of peer pressure situations that they've faced. But you also want to be careful about not opening the door for too much deviant talk with that as well. So that it's kind of a balance there with getting real life examples from them, but also not allowing extensive deviant talk in that portion. And then starting with the discussion of why it's hard at times to resist peer pressure, why we might give in. So I'm going to go back a slide just to get your thoughts without looking at that. So what makes it hard to stand up to peer pressure sometimes? Why do we all kind of give in at times and do something we don't think is the right thing to do? What do y'all think? Okay, so you want the other person or the group to like you. You're afraid they won't if you say no or go against what they're doing. What else? Okay, you think they might make fun of you or tease you if you don't go along with it? What else? Okay, so particularly if you've had a hard time making friends, now you have these friends, you might be afraid to lose them if you don't do what they want you to. Uh-huh.
Way of getting social acceptance.
So this is kind of the norm for this group, a way to get acceptance. I think those are all examples of the kinds of things that we'll hear for kids. And other things have to do with, we didn't even hear, there could actually be concern for physical safety if you've heard about, some of you work with students in schools that have high rates of violence or neighborhood problems, that could be a very real concern as well. Or they might tell you that, reassure you that it's okay, we'll just do it, no one will catch us, no one will know. Then we might, so I think that conversation, starting with that conversation is helpful to acknowledge to the children that we know this is difficult, this isn't easy to do, and we understand why this can be hard to do at times. But then may follow that up and asking, so why do you think it's a good thing to try to resist peer pressure and not do something that you don't think is right, even though there are some reasons why that's hard to do? So what would y'all say? Why is it good to still try to do what you think is the right thing and not give in to peer pressure? Okay, so you don't get into trouble, to avoid those bad consequences we've been talking about. What else?
What comes to mind is like a kid who might live in a community where there's gangs, and lots of people are in gangs together. But maybe use their older brother who might be in jail as an example. We really want to be in jail. You know, what else can we do? I know a lot of people do this, but
yeah. So you've said before that you don't want to go down the path that your brother's gone. That you want to stay out of jail and and finish high school. So they might, no, right, of being in jail, yep. And then there's also an issue of self-respect that often they respond to, that when you stand up to peer pressure and do what you think is right, that it gives you a stronger sense of respect for yourself. So that's a real reason to try to do this. So there's a handout in the child workbook that illustrates a number of different techniques that children can use to resist peer pressure. And I think I had the page number written down. So I think it's over here. But so sometimes it's surprising to them to hear that it can be as simple as saying no thanks. You know, I don't want to go and steal that money with you. Others can be more tricky, like being a broken record. So what do y'all think that means? Saying the same thing over and over. Actually, now we have to kind of describe that as a scratched CD. If you say the same thing over and over, the other person may kind of get bored and realize they're not going to break you down and walk away. You could make an excuse, like, oh, I can't play or I can't go to that store with you right now because I've got to get home, and then leave the situation. So we have a whole list here, and one of the activities that we do, which I think we can take a minute to do here, is to do some role play activities where you have examples of peer pressure situations on strips of paper, and then examples of these refusal skills on strips of paper, and to take turns acting out the peer pressure situation and have the children to practice acting out some of these refusal skills. So we're going to do in one pile here, I have each of these refusal skills written out on a strip of paper. Okay, so we're just going to leave those in a pile. If you wouldn't mind actually folding those for me. And then on this pile, we have some examples of possible peer pressure situations. And try to pick situations that are probably age appropriate for the group that you're working with. So you wouldn't want to start out with drugs or alcohol for elementary students, but other things that they may have faced at school. So what we're going to do, and we could say, group, we've been practicing, trying to gain self-respect and do things that we think are right, and we've been talking about these different skills that you can use to resist peer pressure. So we're going to practice that today. So what I'd like you to do is to pull one of the examples of a peer pressure situation from your pile. Okay, don't tell us what it is, but think about how you're going to act that out. And then is it Gabriella? Gabriella is going to do her best to use one of our refusal skills to resist your pressure. So Gabriella, you can go ahead and pick one. And if you're not sure about it or how to do it, you can ask me, okay? So, and the rest of our group has a job to do, so I want you to watch carefully and see what you think, which of these skills Gabriella is using to resist Paul's pressure, okay?
Gabriella, let's throw some eggs at the house across the street. Nobody's home. No. Here, take it.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I can't
Here, I'm going to throw the first one.
Oh, that you would say that.
Sure, it's fun.
Oh.
Take one.
I can't believe that you would say that.
No, you can do it. Nothing's going to happen.
That's unbelievable.
Nothing's going to happen. You can do it. Take one.
We go to,
Here, I'm going to throw another one.
church together.
Okay, we'll cut there. Great job. So what do you think Gabriella was doing to acting shocked? Yeah. And then a little later on, she actually added her own that fit with almost, because she was saying almost the same thing, so it had elements of that. And then there was one more. Did you catch what it was? She said, coming from you. Right. What do you think that sounds like? Flattery. Yeah, that's a good example of flattering, like, coming from you, someone who doesn't usually do that kind of thing. So how did that feel for you to try to resist his pressure?
It was fine. I just was trying to get into the character, and then I realized that my church example may not be typical or aggressive.
Well, did this feel like something that you could do if someone was actually trying to get you to do this? Okay. How hard do you think that would be if someone were trying to actually get you to go throw eggs at your neighbor's house?
Well, I think it'd be easier one-on-one, but if it was a group of peers, then it might be a little bit more intimidating to do that, but one-on-one, it'd be easier.
So how do you think you could get yourself to do that, even if it was scary to do? or intimidating?
Probably just the repetition of trying to stick with what I had originally said and just kept with it and try to use that as a distractor.
And are there any other of the skills that you think might have worked better than, or felt more comfortable for you to use?
Maybe changing the subject could have been easier, inviting him to do something else instead.
Okay. Suggesting a different activity. Right. Well, what we're going to do is we'll do this one more time and we'll turn the tables. So we'll let you be the pressurer now and let Paul try to use one of these skills to resist your pressure. Okay, so you can go ahead and each pick one. If you get the same one, maybe trade it. Okay, so when you're ready, go ahead.
Paul, you know what I was thinking? I was thinking it'd be a really good idea if we were to talk about Brittany and that, and about Michael. If the two of them had something together and that they were.
No, I'd like to, but I gotta go right now. I'm really late. Be home. I gotta be home after school and I gotta do something.
I think it would be a good idea.
Yeah, I'd like to, but I can't.
You know,
if I had the time, I would do it. But
Okay, we'll cut there. So what refusal skill was Paul using here? Make an excuse, yeah. And what would you want to do next if she kept bothering you?
let's see. I would.
Yeah, often that can be combined with leave the situation. So how did that feel to you to try to resist her pressure?
It was good, but like having just one, you have to keep using over and over again. It's hard. It starts to.
Yeah, and that's part of the discussion that comes up, that often, to have a go-to strategy, but to have others that you can add. So I think you even kind of did 3 in yours. And so that's actually one of the discussion points that you can make with the kids. You could try saying no thanks or making an excuse. If it doesn't work, you may need to leave the situation or add to your list of things to try. So, well, thank you. We give them a hand for. So that's an activity that we'll try to give each child a turn to practice using refusal skills. And then also the follow-up discussion about how that went, if it felt like something they could really do, put into action in a real-life situation like that, and have them identify a few of these that seem like they would work best or they would feel most comfortable using. I'm going to skip this video, which kind of models what we did here.
I can see that some of these things for some kids, they might think these are great ideas, and so how do you like drying eggs in a house might sound super fun to a lot of kids. So how do you kind of manage the discussion around that stuff if you've got a lot of like, oh yeah, that sounds like a fun thing to do. I wouldn't say no because I think that would be fun.
I think because of the way we bring it up or kind of enter this discussion, that actually doesn't happen a lot. They kind of take on the role of trying to resist it. But if it did, it would be worth taking time to stop and talk about that or what the consequences would be if you did that as well. So there are several other activities in this portion of the program. One that's not on here is an activity where they talk about what the qualities are that you look for in a good friend, and actually write an advertisement. It's called Wanted a Good Friend, and there's an example of that in your child workbook. And so they talk through what kind of person they are, what kind of activities they like to do, and then what kind of friend they're looking for. And another activity is to take time thinking about the current groups that exist in their school and who they spend their time with, and then what impact that has on them. So the way we do this activity is to come to the session with a number of circles cut out and have them actually think through some of the natural groups that are in their school or in their class, in their grade. And if you're working with middle school students, they can do this really easily because they're often cliques and they can picture where each group stands or hangs out at school. In elementary school, that with some discussion, they can do this, but it's not as familiar or as pronounced to them at that point. But what we actually have them do is to kind of think through naturally occurring groups or clusters and to actually write the names of the children who they kind of see as fitting in each group on the circle. And they can actually place the children's names on the circle in the center of the circle if they see the child as being central to that group, or more on the periphery, the outside of the circle, if they see them as a little bit of an outsider in the group. And then you can ask them to add their own name to any groups that they think that they're part of, and write their name closer or further away from the center, depending on where they think they fall in the group. So children that I've done this activity with before would come up with groups like the cool kids who do well in school, the cool kids who get in trouble at school, the kids who like sports, the mean girls, and we'll kind of write the names of those kids on the circle. And so you follow that up with discussion. So which of these groups do you think, if you were in, would help you meet your goals or the things that you want to accomplish, or to act in the way that you want to? And which of these groups do you think, if you're part of it, it's actually going to cause you to get in trouble or take away from you meeting your goals of finishing high school or making the basketball team? And then identify if they've already put themselves on the circle or circles for the groups that they think would be a good influence for them. And if so, are they on the periphery of that group? And if so, how could they become more central in that group? Or if they're not on the circle for the group of kids that they think are really respected and looked up to, how could they actually start to become better friends with one or more of the children in that group? And we kind of use that as a lead-in to actually practicing some social skills for entering or joining an existing group. I'm going to come back to some of the other items on here. So around this time in the program, we also, preferably if you can, in an individual session, find out a little bit more about the child's neighborhood. And especially before we apply the PIC model, the PIC problem-solving model, to a neighborhood problem. So find out a little bit about what their neighborhood's like, what kinds of things they do for fun in their neighborhood, who they hang out with in their neighborhood, if there are kids in their neighborhood who get in trouble, and if so, do they hang out with those kids? And then also if there are kids in their neighborhood that are kids who others kind of look up to or who stay out of trouble, and if so, are they friends with those kids? Yeah, it really does generate very useful information. I think it's best done individually, and then also you'd want to anticipate that it could raise safety or reporting issues or concerns. So before you administer this questionnaire, it'd be a good time to remind the child about your reporting requirements as well.
I'm also wondering about intergroup conflict, like I'm from this neighborhood and they're from that neighborhood.
Right. I think that's why it's worth implementing individually. And even that circle activity with the groups that I was describing earlier, I found that bringing each child in the group their own set of circles to fill out can actually work better than having the whole group do that as a group activity for the reason that you raised. So there are several activities meant to kind of promote the child's positive development toward the end of the program, particularly in relation to their peers. So another kind of mastery activity for them, similar to the video that they make, is that they actually make a poster for display in the school that illustrates some of the peer pressure refusal skills that we were modeling, that they can draw that out. Kind of draw out a peer pressure situation, or bring in pictures from magazines and glue it to a poster, and kind of draw out with thought bubbles to show children applying some of those skills in action. And so you spend a session working with them to develop a poster and then ask for permission to display that in the school. Again, kind of making them the experts on the subject that they've been learning. So there's another particular activity that seeks to do that. We call it the strength bombardment activity. And prior to this activity, you as the leader want to take time to think through some positive qualities that you can emphasize in each of the students who've been in your group, and really try to identify important qualities that they might have. So through the course of this group, Jeremiah, I've noticed that you were kind of always there for your other group members, ready to get them a tissue if they needed it, or help me with the lights, or help get a chair if we didn't have enough chairs. That was really great. And Tanya, I noticed that you were really a good leader, and whenever we had a group activity and needed a leader, you kind of took that job on. That was terrific. So really try to come up with a list of a few specific positive qualities that you can emphasize for each child. And if you can, also get some input from the teacher and the parent about that as well, to emphasize for each child. And it's also nice if you can take time to have the children compliment each other as well, to really end by building up their strengths. And also ask the children to try to identify strengths in themselves, since that's really an important skill as well, and important for their self-esteem. So you can give them an opportunity to identify some of their own strengths as well. And they do that on this kind of bullseye type worksheet that's in their workbook, where they can actually record down the nice compliments that everyone gives them. And you can talk about the fact that it's often hard to accept compliments from others, and that's normal, but it's important to be able to kind of sit with those and hear those as well. And so we want to really make the end of the program feel like an important celebration. So one of the ways we do that is by giving each child a certificate, and hopefully the group has earned the party, so you can have a party at the end and pass out the certificates at the end. We've even given out certificates in front of the whole school, like if the 5th grade is having a graduation, we've actually given out the certificates to the students in front of the whole school. And they love it. Their parents are proud. It's often the only award that they get. We just have to be very careful about how we frame it so that we don't break their confidentiality. So if we do something like that, we're very careful to say they finished a program to get ready for middle school, or something very kind of non-threatening, non-stigmatizing. So the last session is meant to be a review and termination session. So as part of the party, they can watch their completed pick video that they've made back, and they always have fun watching themselves on screen. There's a listing of review questions that you could use to turn into a review game at the last session. So we actually have kind of game spinners and game cards covering the content of the program, and they have a lot of fun playing that game at the end of the program, and it's also a way for them to earn some extra points at the last session that they can use to spend all of their points from the prize box. So it's a way to consolidate their learning and also gain some more bonus points. And we also take time to ask each child to identify some positive changes that they feel that they've made during the course of the program, and then also make an effort to point out the positive behavior changes that we've seen in each child as well. We like to help them from a relapse prevention standpoint anticipate setbacks. So you've done a really great job learning to control your anger, to help use your coping statements or your deep breathing to keep your anger from getting too high on your anger thermometer. All of us have our anger go up higher than we'd like on our anger thermometer some of the time. So that's likely to happen to you even after you leave this group. But the more you can just notice that happening and do your best to use the skills you've learned here to bring it back down or keep that from happening again, that's going to serve you well. And you can help them anticipate some of those issues that came up related to a variety of the skills that you've taught in the program. And then we try to hold kind of a graduation from Coping Power ceremony and pass out the certificates and have the pizza party or an ice cream party if they've earned it. And we have a small budget for it. We often let them pick a few things that they'd like to have at that party. And then if you feel like the child really does need further services or other types of services, you can mention to them that you'll be talking with their parent to provide some other recommendations for other services. Or if you're able to, you could also offer booster services to check in with them on a monthly rather than a weekly basis to see how they're doing once the group is complete. So that's the end of the child component. So thanks for bearing with us through all of that. Any remaining comments or questions about any of that child material?
Do you have to make any adaptations if you're working with kids who are really rejected. I could see how if you've got these aggressive, rejected kids, that might be potentially more challenging. Or I, as a therapist, might be more nervous, at least, approaching a task like that with those kids.
Yeah, part of the activities in that section include role plays of trying to introduce yourself to a group or to join an activity that's going on. And we'll actually do role plays showing that not go well and then what you could do better to have it go well. And so sometimes a child who has more social skills or could be rejected may have trouble when it's their turn on that role play. And we just try to gently kind of process how it went and give them some specific feedback for what they could do better to improve on their social skills. But you may not want them to go first on that and try to find ways to protect them from that rejection as much as possible.